Awesome. And we are live, and the show is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Tawfiq. Amjad, I'm very excited. In fact, I'm honored to be here with you and the many people around the world attending the Techwadi annual forum. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation. By way of introduction, my name is Anas. I've been a startup founder. That exit took me into financial services for about 10 years, where I led product teams, strategy teams, and marketing teams. And then I found my way somewhat by accident to Google 10 years ago. There I helped scale and lead our business operations, particularly on the ad side. And the last 2 years, I've been leading strategy and operations in Google Cloud, and it's been a very fun 2 years. So I have a lot of interest in the area that your startup works in because it's a fun and developing space. There are so many topics that I'd like to cover, and we have a limited amount of time. So we'll try to keep the conversation going. I'd love to touch on your personal backstory as a superhero or maybe as a founder. Like, what is your origin story? I'd love to move from there into scaling in the pandemic. I know you have a passion for coding, and that relates very much to your product. And so kind of tying your passion to your product, and you're trying to solve some big problems. You're building a business, but that business is premised on solving big problems. So without further ado, let me begin. Can we start from the beginning, if you don't mind, maybe a little more personally? Can you tell us about your childhood, your upbringing, and your education? And as you reflect on that, can you tell us how it links a little bit to what you're doing today? Because again, there's an origin story to every founder, and I'm sure yours begins somewhere that none of us far, far away in a galaxy far, far away. And I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. And I guess we can go back to when I got my hands on the first computer that I saw. And it's actually one of my earliest memories. It was 1992, 1993. I was born and raised in Amman, kind of lower middle class family. My father was a government employee, engineer in the Amman municipality, Blamane, and he worked his way up from just being an entry-level engineer all the way to becoming a city manager a few years ago. But at first, we were just family trying to get by, and my father Fawzi Masad had a great passion for technology and computers and the internet until today. Like, you'll see him sending me now Bitcoin prices every day. So he's always on the cutting edge of, he holds Bitcoin. So he's always on the cutting edge of technology. But at the time, he didn't have a lot of resources, but he did invested in a computer, and he was fascinated by it. He got it, and every night, he actually put it in me and my brother's room that we used to play in. And so every night he would go in there after work, and he would study and learn how to code and learn how the computer works. And I would just peer behind his back, when his friends are around and he's showing them stuff, and I would just look at what they're doing. And then after they leave at night, I'll get out of bed, sneak into the bedroom, to the room, and start playing with the computer. And at first I was doing kind of basic DOS stuff because we didn't have Windows or anything back then. So create directories, move things around, open apps, open games, and things like that. Eventually, I figured out how to actually take the entire thing apart and put it back together. And my father says that one day he walks into the room and he sees this computer that he paid thousands of dollars for, all the pieces on the floor, and he was totally freaking out. And I was like, no, wait, I can actually put it back together. So I kind of learned how to hack it, right? How to figure out how the computer works and all that stuff. So that was my introduction to computers, and I think I was, there was a feeling about it that I just understood it. I understood how computers work, and I was really interested and excited about them. I didn't get my real coding experience until years later, So, people from the region might remember we used to have these computer shows, and so you would go to these computer shows, like maybe like late '90s. Internet cafes started popping around. I think the first one is still around, Boxat Cafe, Jabal Amman, and it was very exciting time in like computers and the internet. I still haven't like really coded something other than like DOS scripts and things like that. So we went to this computer show and we bought a CD-ROM driver. So the first time we're going to install the CD-ROM driver, and we bought like a random set of CDs just to try it. And it literally was random stuff. It had fax software, it had some games, it had a bunch of other programs. So we installed the CD, we started trying out the CD-ROMs, and then one application caught my eye. It was like a very primitive IDE coding environment. And I started building applications. I was probably like at the time 9 or 10. And my first application was to teach my younger brother, Faris, who actually works at Repl.it today, mathematics. So he was like 5 years old. And I built an application that taught him via kind of guessing the multiplication table. And it was like my first user. And it was like really fun.
So we have a 10-year-old kid in Amman who is using a computer as Legos, freaking his dad out. You must have been 5 or 6 then when the computer came in.
Yes, 5 or 6.
Which is remarkable. And there are a few themes here. I mean, not only are you curious and bold, but you're also looking to find a way to help your younger brother. I mean, it's amazing how when you talk about people's childhoods, those things propagate and the past becomes the present. I had wanted to kind of go through your journey to get to Repl.it, but I'm going to kind of go out of order in some of the questions that I thought, and maybe you can tell us what you do today, because it just so connects the IDE environment that you found on a random CD-ROM that you were installing and then helping teach, connect that to what you're doing today. And maybe you can share with everyone here, like, we have folks who may be in consumer tech, we have folks in health tech, but not everyone is aware of DevOps and of the environments that maybe you're creating. Walk us through your product.
Yeah, so you know how software today is so easy to access. Like, we're on this web platform, we're doing this conference. If I want to write something, I open a Google Doc. All the software is becoming really accessible. You don't have to buy CDs or download stuff. You can just go to a website and you get the piece of software. Programming is not like that. So in Arabic, we say "el-skafi hafi," right? And the engineers that are building the tremendous, valuable software that we have today actually work as if it's in the 90s and 80s, right? So when you want to write a line of code, you want to start learning how to program, the first step is typically, and still to this day, is to download a gigabyte worth of software. That is your environment, that is your compiler, interpreter, the language you're learning, and maybe the libraries around it. Figure out how to put them together and set them up, and then write your first line of code. And so you have learners coming into programming, and the first impression of programming that I have to do all these IT tasks in order to just get something running. And that's a huge turnoff. And the reason we have so few programmers in the world, despite that software is kind of eating the world. I'm sure, like, with your experience, like every startup founder, their main problem is like there isn't enough talent. All the talent's scooped up by the big companies, and there's just not enough talent. There isn't enough programmers. And when you look at it, the problem is we just made it so hard to get started with programming. And so back in college, back in PSUT, Jamiat al-Amira Sumayya, where I was going to do computer science, I had the same problem. I didn't have a laptop then. And so every time I go to a computer science class, say object-oriented programming in Java, or C programming or web development in PHP, you have to do the same song and dance that I just described, download all the software and do all of that. So I had the idea then, I want to open a web browser and I want to start coding. I don't want to worry about any of this. And so that was the original idea for Repl.it. It took a lot of meandering, but today what we do is you open Repl.it in 2 seconds, you get an entire environment that not only allows you to learn how to code and do the basics of coding, but also hosts your application, allows you to collaborate with other, kind of like Google Docs, you can see them live. And then on top of that, we built a bunch of tools that allows teachers to teach programming, allows peer-to-peer learning. And then also right now we're seeing businesses adopt Repl.it as a way to actually develop software and collaborate internally at their company. So we're sort of rebuilding the entire craft of programming from the ground up to be collaborative, to be instant, and to be approachable.
Yeah, I think that's so remarkable. The idea that you can literally eliminate the barriers and have a 6-year-old, you just, today, log in and maybe watch a YouTube video or any other, there are a ton of academies. I think you worked at Code Academy. There are many places to learn how to code, but actually access the quote, not have to build the environment and be able to write and share, which is a very unique thing that I want to touch on too in the remote space that we're finding it, but we'll come to that later. It is pretty remarkable because sharing is important for learning as well, not just creativity. How have you found developers? There's this kind of notion of a developer, and I'm going to use stereotypes here. Very smart, collaborative when it comes to development, but not to their code. They're very possessive of their code and the optimization of their code. You get this idea of an author who's writing a book, and then yes, they want editors to critique, but not when they're writing. And so what have you seen as you've lowered the barriers, you've kind of allowed learning to happen? That's exciting. That's one application, but then there's actual code development. Walk through both experiences and how Repl.it's kind of just giving you new insights to how the future of coding might develop.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that there's this stereotype of a kind of coder in their basement and maybe they're hard to deal with. And part of it was true. And, they're kind of possessive. They maybe don't like people who are newbies and they give them attitude. And we saw a lot of resistance early on from those type of people. And it's natural. Every time you create something that's potentially disruptive, you have people that think in a very limited mindset. So they think in zero sum. Instead of expanding the pie for everyone, they feel like, oh, these people are going to come and take my business, or you're increasing access. Therefore, there's going to be less opportunity for me. And so all these motivations we got a lot of pushback early on. And it's sort of natural. Like when you read history, you read about something like the printing press. When reading and writing became democratized, the medieval priesthood in Europe were really angry about that, right? And so it's the same thing where we're making programming democratized, and there's a certain class of people that are unhappy with that. But that's fine. I mean, you're either on the right side of history or you're not. And so, the way we see programming going forward is like any other profession today. If you look at most professions, people are spending their time in collaborative environments. Everything is becoming collaborative. Everything is shared via URL. I mean, take industry by industry, take design. Design used to be this very insular kind of in your Adobe, Photoshop, and now everyone's sharing Figma links around, right? And then the cool thing about it is not only your designers are in the design environment, your salespeople, your customer support people, everyone has access to the design environment. With Repl.it, it's the same thing with code. Not only your engineers have access to the programming environment and the development environment, and potentially the hosting environment as well. But everyone, the company, your customers, everyone you can like just share URLs around, and we make computing accessible via URL. In the same way that YouTube made videos accessible via URL, in the same way that Facebook and Instagram made photos accessible via URL, the next stage is computing accessible via URL, and this is how we think about it.
I love that vision. I'm going to take a step back to your origin story. So you're a 10-year-old, you're coding for your brother, and then you eventually go to college to study computer science. If I've tracked your history properly, you found your way into a job at a Yahoo. So at the time, a leading internet property at the time when the internet was new. It seems that you made your way to the States by way of New York at Co Academy, spent some time at Facebook, and then ultimately about maybe 5 or so years ago, started Repl.it. Walk us through that journey. And there are folks out there who are thinking about their journey. We have a wide range of folks. We have folks who have sold businesses on this call. We have folks who are probably somewhere in various steps of your journey. And so what I'm interested in is everyone thinks that people plan to do something, like it's intentional. And definitely people have ideas of where they want to be. But paths can be meandering and opportunities present themselves. Do you take the red pill or the blue pill at every moment when a decision presents itself? Walk us through your kind of growth from that 10-year-old, not into launching Repl.it, but to adjust before launching Repl.it.
Yeah, for sure. So my first kind of quote unquote real programming environment that I got my hands on was VB4. People from Jordan who are listening, in Amman, you could buy these programs that are bootleg programs, from downtown, right? So I went there. I remember there was like a Visual Basic for bootleg program. So I bought that. I had learned about Visual Basic from my cousin who was older than me, going to learn computer science at school. I was like, okay, let me try that. And so I got Visual Basic and started playing around with it. And this is where I started like really coding and writing BASIC. At the time, I was playing a lot of Counter-Strike at these like internet cafes in Jordan. And my parents were not really thrilled about that. But one thing I noticed at these places is, they're surrounded by computers, and it was all manual. So you go in, you pay 1 GD, you get a couple of hours to play, you go on the computer, you start playing, and then the kind of store clerk has to remember your time, has to like write it on the notebook, look at the watch, and go tap you on the shoulder and ask you whether you want to add more time or you want to leave. And I thought that was like very inefficient. It was like, why don't we write a little bit of software to manage this? So my first customer was a franchise called Hercules in Amman, and I started building the software for them to manage their store. So basically, you pay the time, you create an account with a password, you go into the machine, you start playing the game, and it had an accounting system, it had everything, and I sold it with a contract to maintain the whole thing, and I was 15 years old. So when I was 15, I was making hundreds of JDs just selling the software and maintaining it. But it's actually very hard because I did a lot of mistakes. And one mistake is like I used Microsoft Access as a DB, and Microsoft Access doesn't scale. So it used to get corrupted all the time. And I had a pager that I bought, and the stores would page me during the day, and I was in class, and their businesses kind of stopped because the software is broken. So I had to run away from school. I had to literally leave 10th grade and take a taxi and go fix the software. And of course, the school will call my parents, and they're like, "Your kid is running away from school." I'm like, I'm running to go build a business. And so it was a lot of fun. Made good amount of money. But then after a while, got everyone was pirating software all the time. My software got pirated, and kind of moved to other stuff. in 2004, 5, just before I got into university, I got bored with programming a little bit, so I wanted to go into IT. I had also this vision that AI will write all the software in the future, and so I saw it. So I felt like maybe if I go into IT, I could actually have a job in the future because software is going to get automated.
I see.
Looking
Yeah.
back, kind of dumb, right? But it was fun.
Well, very, very smart, but maybe just the time horizon was off.
Yeah. So yeah, I went into IT. I worked, as a like a network IT administrator for a bunch of companies, and that was a fun learning experience because I got to interact with people. I got to get shouted at because I'm the intern that gets to kind of break things, and so that was like a good edifying experience. But I kept working throughout my, I got into college, and I kept working the whole time just because I was really following my curiosity, and the extra money helped as well and helped me be independent and make my own choices. Another job that I had was with Kharabish, who at the time were incubating startups at their office. And so I joined them and worked at a small startup there. We built this like cash flow app. It was like, really cutting edge JavaScript at the time. And so I led the engineering there, had a lot of fun, didn't go anywhere. But that was a fun experience because Kharabish was during the Arab Spring. They were like doing all these controversial cartoons, and it felt like you were part of something. You were like a revolutionary or something like that. And then, finally, when we invented the thing that became Repl.it, because of the problem that I had in school, that opened up a lot of doors. But by that time, I had gone into Yahoo, and we released. We had this technical breakthrough because we wanted to solve a problem, and we were too naive to know that it was hard. Nobody has ever done it before. Nobody was able to run code other than JavaScript in the browser, and we got something like 12 languages in the browser. And we didn't know how big this was, but we released the project open source, and it got on Hacker News, it got in the news. The inventor of JavaScript tweeted about it. And, here we were, it was me and a few friends from college, kids from Jordan who are like making international news. And I was like, this is awesome. I need to kind of continue building on that. So I wanted to start a startup. It was really hard to attract any funding in Jordan.
Can we pause there for a minute? I mean, yeah. I think this goes to a theme I know Techwadi's passionate about, and many folks on the call are. I can see you are, which is no one owns innovation. No one has a predestined right to say that, oh, all the innovation has to come from this part of the world or this area or these people. And that's a big theme, I think, in Repl.it itself, is give people the tools, give people the skills, and allow the curiosity in all of us to allow for innovation. And so what I just love about that little anecdote you told is you sorry, you just paused there. I didn't know if you heard that. You weren't aiming to create nothing that's ever been done before. Mm-hmm. You were curious. You were like tinkering, mm-hmm. and here you are at Yahoo with what I'm going to call a day job, and yet with a few friends you chance upon this thing, and then you get tweeted, and you realize that maybe as a young man, in this case, what I just said in the beginning, that no one has a right or a monopoly on innovation in this way. What did that feel like for that moment? Because that's not something that, you just trip over and you find that. And what did that do to your own confidence and your own ability to say, okay, maybe I'm more than I thought I was?
Yeah. it's when you try to achieve something impossible, it's hard. If people tell you it's impossible, you're going to lose motivation. And the reason why young people tend to be the ones, it's not always the case, but in a lot of places, young people tend to be the people that create breakthroughs in technology, is because they don't know what's impossible. There's this Zen saying that I'm really fond of, which is, in the mind of the master, there are only few possibilities. In the mind of the beginner, it's infinite, right? So when you don't know what you don't know, you naively attack the problem. And so we attack the problem very naively. And we happened through a bit of luck, through a bit of technical ingenuity, through a lot of hard work and late nights and all-nighters and all of that, we happened across a technical breakthrough. When we released it and we started seeing this explosion of attention and energy, like there were people at conferences presenting our project. It was totally insane. Like, why are you presenting our project? But we were so happy.
Well, you open sourced it, but yeah.
Yeah, we open sourced it, and Code Academy and Udacity, a bunch of companies in the US started using it. And it was one, it made me realize what you said, that the world has changed. Right now, it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what you do, you can contribute significantly, you can make progress, and you can create an explosion in terms of a breakthrough, and people will recognize that through Twitter, through Hacker News, through Reddit. You don't need the New York Times to cover you. In fact, the New York Times covers old news. Like, new things happen on social networks and in these kind of decentralized networks. And so people share these things and talk about them, and you end up kind of building a name for yourself. And definitely increased my confidence. I was kind of already pretty confident because my mom raised me to be that way. So I had this always kind of chip on my shoulder that I can do things, but definitely everything that I've attempted and been able to accomplish, your confidence keep getting higher, and your ambition starts getting higher as well, and you feel like you can accomplish a lot. But also, I feel like that anyone can accomplish a lot. And this is the crucial point you were talking about with how this ideology is kind of embedded in what Repl.it does. What Repl.it does is gives opportunity to anyone in the world to be entrepreneurial. And this is what really excites us. And it's not just about learning to code. That's important. It's about opportunity. And this is why the world is so exciting today. COVID had a lot of dramatic and tragic results, but the kind of the what happened with the acceleration of remote work, there was a story in the news the other day about a girl from Gaza who applied to work at Repl.it and Google. We gave her an offer. She actually went with Google. I don't blame her for that. But here you have people in Gaza actually working for Google. And so it's a new world. It's a lot easier than the world that I came through.
Yeah.
It's still challenging, but today you don't even have to go through my path of going to New York and going to the US and doing all that. You can be in Jordan and you can be in Palestine and you can do all that stuff.
Well, I want to touch on that. You touched about how your ambition grew. You had a chip on your shoulder. We all are humbled at some points in our lives, so hopefully no fall is too hard. But you had that, and you gained ambition with this success. Walk us, because people are interested in fundraising all the time in these founder stories. And then I want to kind of conclude with a few bigger thoughts on the product and the current events of the pandemic. But maybe briefly walk us through your decision then to start a company, to leave the tried and true path of a career that is predictable, but one that you're having success in, and to raise capital. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you've probably raised upwards of $25 million, name brand, VCs, not just name brand the folks who are really thinking around two corners and who are at the center of some of these disruptive ideas. Andreessen, I think, is one of your investors. They're into crypto. They're just into the ideas that are, when you look at them at first sight, you're like, what? And then like 5 years later, you're like, oh, they were way ahead of me. So talk to me about your fundraising journey and the decision to say, okay, I'm leaving security and moving into insecurity, but opportunity with the startup.
Well, I went into Facebook after Code Academy because for a few reasons, I was attracted to technical challenges at Facebook. Zuckerberg was talking about internet.org and kind of spreading internet all over the world, and that kind of appealed to the ideology that I had, that we talked about, of increasing access, and so I was pretty excited about that. But also, like, I wanted some stability. Like, you can't fault people for wanting some stability. Like, after doing this very risky startup, I got married, and we want to like enjoy life a little bit, Haya and I, and so we went into Facebook, and it was like starting from scratch. Nobody knew who I was. Like, nobody knew my journey. Nobody knew my story with Code Academy, and so it was exciting because I had to prove myself from scratch. And it did that as well at Facebook through open source contributions and through internal tools that I built for other people. And we can dig into that if you'd like. But in terms of like a fundraising, in 2016, when I quit my job at Facebook, so Haya and I can work on Repl.it again, we had already started working on it while I was at Facebook. So it was a side project. By the time we quit, we had 80,000 monthly active users. So a pretty sizable number. And so I would suggest that to a lot of entrepreneurs. Always be like working on a side project or planting some seeds, so that, especially if you're at a big company and you can afford that kind of freedom. Maybe work at a startup, learn what it takes to create a startup, but also work at a bigger company and learn what not to do. Don't learn the bad habits, right? And gain some security, gain some money. So we had a bit of runway. We had, like, from my personal money, we had 3 or 4 months that we could like live comfortably before we become homeless. And so
you're saying you had some money, but 3 or 4 months for many people is scary. I just want to give you de-risked with some users, but you were willing to take kind of a jump. Just because we're running short on time, I know we started a little late, so we'll go a little over if that's okay, the time, unless you've got to jump to something here in the next minute. Walk me through the actual fundraising mechanics and anything you'd give to a founder or an entrepreneurial group out there around the fundraising mechanics.
Yeah, actually, I wrote a post on my blog post called Kierkegaard and Entrepreneurship, which is like a very intellectual thing, but I was kind of working through the ideas of like, what does it mean to take the jump into entrepreneurship, and talked a little bit about, and like reasoned why it was like more important for me to do that than to have the security. And look, like I said, 3 or 4 months, yes, that's a lot. But ultimately, like, I can always go back to Facebook or to some other company. Ultimately, I can go back to Amman, to my family. Like, it's like, we're still in some regard kind of privileged in that way. So there was always some fallback. So just think through the risk. It's not that bad. You're not going to go.
Yeah, I think there are 2 risks people worry about. One is the financial risk and the survival, and there's a very calculated approach to that because you can calculate dollars and cents. I think many people have a fear of failure.
Right.
In other words, they've been given a ticket, they've worked hard, they have a reputation, they have a name. Often they're worried about failure and how failure reflects on them. And I remember when I started my company, this is a long time before your story. I'm an old man. I'd love to have met you 5 years ago and invested in you. But when I started my company, the first guy who gave me a check, we had all the term sheets to sign, angel funder, and he said, I'm not going to sign that. I'm going to give you the check first, and I'm going to shake your hand because this may or may not work, and that's okay. And
Right.
these legal, he had a very forward view of what it meant to invest in high risk things, and the failure was okay. But that was not a value that I had at that time. I looked at it as failure is not an option. I'm taking your money and I'm scared.
Right.
So, I mean, I think people are afraid of that failure.
Right. Yeah, I don't have that. Whatever bug that I have, I don't have that kind of fear. But I'm more afraid of regretting things than actually failing. But because I know we have to wrap up, let me give some advice, because I think that's what you're trying to get, some tactical advice on fundraising. Don't make yourself attractive for VCs for the virtue of being attractive to VCs. Like, some people will just ride the latest hype just to look attractive to VCs. The most attractive thing to VCs is traction. Just try to get traction as early as possible, all the way, like, from having a demo, a prototype, having paying users, even if it's like not so much fake, but like even if it's a little bit contrived, like even if your mother is your customer or something like that, just get some customers and like show some traction. That's the most important thing. Second thing, don't I know it's easy for me because we have these brand names, but I don't think it matters as much anymore, right? Like, so go talk to angels. There's now, these crowdfunding things. There's a lot of means for funding. Angel investors are a lot of people, and they're really helpful at first. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and go after like the really big VCs. Talk to anyone that might be interested in giving you money. And third, when it comes time to actually doing the fundraising, especially at the A and B, realize that competition matters, right? So competition between VCs really matters, and it's a market, right? So if you almost have to run it as an auction. If you're at the A or B stage, make sure that you're talking to multiple people, you have multiple options, and not like put your all your eggs in one basket. And finally, look for people that VCs, your investors will end up working for you. So it's almost like you're hiring someone. So interview them as much as they're interviewing you. And it has a psychological also aspect where you will look confident and you'll look like you have options. So that's good as well. But make sure you're working with people you like. Life's too short to kind of work with people you don't like.
All right, I'm going to do one final question because I think Parallel Panel is beginning as we speak, and it looks amazing as well, and I want folks to maximize the attendance everywhere. I'm going to combine a few questions, and you can also combine any parting thoughts on this. What is success for Repl.it for you? You have a social set of cultural values that are driving you, and it's very obvious that there's a change in the world you're interested in, and it drives you. There's a commercial aspect about who your customers are and what business and financial success look for the firm. There is this unique moment in history right now, and I hope you can still hear me. I'm going to say, once every 100 years, it seems we have a pandemic and we're experiencing it. It happens that despite its tragedy, Repl.it is a beneficiary of some of the trends that emerge from the pandemic. So if you can take all of those three things and give us a view of Repl.it's future and what success looks like for you, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, there are multiple lenses to look at it. From a technical point of view, I really want computing to be a utility. The Google Cloud and AWS and others, you guys are doing amazing things hard, and I want to be the layer to kind of bring that to everyone in the world. Now with things like Starlink, everyone's getting connectivity. I want compute to be as simple as watching a YouTube video or as simple as operating a mobile app. I want to make it so easy for anyone to get access to superpowers that the cloud gives you. So compute as utility is something I'm really interested in. So that means, blanketing the world with compute. So I want the Repl.it infrastructure, the compute provider, even if we're sitting on top of the clouds. And from a social perspective, yeah, I think if everyone has the opportunity to build businesses, to participate in the digital economy, to become a freelancer, to join companies, to change their lives, to make a name for themselves, I think that'll distribute a lot of the wealth and create new wealth in the world. And I think a lot more people, a lot more countries around the world, a lot more geolocations will be beneficiaries of the tech boom, right? So Silicon Valley was the main beneficiary of the internet and tech boom in the past few decades. Now we want to decentralize that and make sure everyone has the opportunity to participate in that economy. So I think in a kind of like huge upside part of the situation is that we're going to see people have more opportunity to exit poverty and make something of themselves because these tools are accessible. And third, from like just like a workflow tactical perspective, I think like we talked about earlier, programming is going to be a lot more collaborative, a lot more roles of people will be engaging in programming. So it's not going to be just a programmer thing. It's either Repl.it or some of the no-code tools as well. It'll make computing more accessible for people, and you're going to see companies, whether they're software or tech companies, you're going to see them all participating in the software economy. And so if we're successful, all these three things will come true. And if these things will come true, Repl.it is not only a multi-billion-dollar company, potentially trillions of dollars, but that's not the thing that motivates us. The thing that motivates us is really seeing a change in the world.
Well, that's wonderful. I wish we had another hour because I'd love to get into the collaborative coding and how you're using containers to allow for all the code to kind of be committed there. There's just so many interesting things you're doing on the technical side, on the product side. We could probably talk for at least another hour. Our time is up. And so I would love to catch up with you offline. We can have the audience switch over, but wonderful to get to know you here. I want to thank everyone for listening. And if you've still got time, please switch over to the conversation with Hussein at Cruise, who heads up artificial intelligence. I think they're also a Google Cloud customer. So I'm excited for that conversation as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.